Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey now, today we're going to take a look at Pirates of the Seven Seas from IDW and Pandasaurus. Now, the designers of this game are actually the designers of Mysterium, but this could not be more different than Mysterium. And not just in the artwork and theme, but the fact that this is a purely competitive pirate game that is about action selection and sort of Citadel-style card play, and together with rolling a ton of dice and trying to destroy enemy ships and building ships and getting curses and using curses. There's a lot of different things going on in this game. None of them cooperative, so bear that in mind as we go through this. There's also interesting elements like the fact that the tin itself that it comes in is going to be used as part of the game board, and there's another part of the game, a huge part of the game, like the map where you do ship battles, that was actually like the insert that was on the back of the tin before you bust open the shrink wrap, like the advertising part. You'll see what I mean. So there's quite a lot of things going on in this game. It's very interesting. Let me go ahead and do an overview of the game. Then we're going to come back and let you know what I think. Alright, I'm going to give you a brief overview of Pirates of the Seven Seas. This is a competitive game for up to 4 players. The goal of the game is to have the most points. Points in this game are treasure chests. And one thing you'll notice right away is that in this game you are actually using the box, or in this case a tin, as part of the game itself. And actually this other board here is the little promotional backing that you would find inside the shrink wrap of the box. So that's actually part of the game board, and then you'll flip over the tin and use that as both a scoring track and also to keep track of certain tokens in the game. We'll get to all that. Now, the game is going to end when you get to this last rounds card in the Adventurer's deck. You're actually going to shuffle this into the deck, well, not shuffle it in, but shuffle the deck and then place this as the 5th card from the bottom of the deck. When that card is revealed, you're actually going to put it off to the side and put this little marker here. Actually, the rules don't make it clear whether it's the thicker red marker or the skinnier one, but it doesn't really matter. One of them is the first player marker, one of them is this tracker. You're going to put that on the card, and then that signifies that you have 3 more rounds of play. Once you finish with that 3rd round of play, the game is over. Everyone's going to count up their chests, do the final scoring, which we'll get to later, and then that will be the end. Whoever has the most points / chests is the winner of the game. So every player is going to take a set of 10 6-sided dice. This represents your ships. Now, you don't have these yet. They're in your reserve for right now. But whenever you build them, they become part of your fleet, and they can potentially take place in naval battles, which will all happen out on this board. You'll also have a score marker of your color, and you're going to have a set of cards with your colored backs on the other side. However, these are all the same cards for every player. In much the same way as games like Citadel's, this is card-driven, where every player is going to simultaneously pick a card from their hand, place it face down, and then you're going to go through a certain order of cards from 1 to 7 to see if people have that card. So it starts off with the shipwright, and you'll say, okay, who's got the shipwright? Does anyone have the shipwright? And more than one person might have that person, but if no one does, you move on to the next one and the next one. When someone finally does have it, then you have to resolve those actions in turn order from the first player, which is going to pass every round. So you'll also have this Adventurer's deck, and like I said, after you put this card into the bottom of the deck, you're going to, from the other shuffled up cards from the top, every player is going to be dealt out 3 of those. And the Adventurer's cards are sort of a way to think of those are fuel for a lot of the actions that you do, but we'll get back to that. You're also going to have a goods deck that you're going to shuffle up. Now, the goods deck actually consists of 3 different goods, and then 1 special type of item. So you have rum, you have fruits, and coffee. These are the sort of goods that you're going to try to sell in order to get more treasure chests. But you also have talismans that you're going to find. Now, talismans on their own are going to be worth 1 point at the end of the game. You'll just put, every time you take stuff from the goods deck, you put it face up in front of you. And talismans don't take any space in your ships. You just put them face up. They're worth a point. You also get to take a yin-yang token when you take one of those. And you'll get these in other ways as well. Yin-yang tokens do 2 different things. One thing is that at the end of the game, each one is worth 1/3 of a point. So 3 of them is worth 1 full treasure chest. The other thing is that they are fuel for your ritual spells. Now over here, there are 3 different types of tiles One of them is always available and can be purchased multiple times. They can all be purchased multiple times, but this one is just something that everyone can do as many times as they want. The other two are actual tiles that you're going to have to keep track of, so you can buy those as well. But you'll notice that each of them has a different set of yin-yangs on it. That's how many yin-yang tokens you have to spend in order to fuel those rituals. Other tokens of note here, you have black spot tokens, because every pirate game has to have black spots. At the end of the game, you'll never willingly take black spots. You're going to be forced to, or take them as a consequence of taking a better action. But whenever you're forced to take one, at the end of the game, each one is worth -3 points. And by the way, the thing about these tokens, for either the ritual tokens or the black spot tokens, are that since there's a limited quantity of them for some reason, some of them are ×2, or there's even ×3 and ×4. It's just a way for you to keep track of multiples. The other tokens here, this is for scoring. So once you lap the track, you'll take one of those, and it also goes to 80 as well. And then these are 4 Corsair tokens. Those represent that you have become affiliated with a certain nation out in the world, like Britain or France, and which comes with some benefits, which we'll get to, but also comes with some penalties. There's only 4 of those, and when they're gone, they're gone. Alright, so the easiest way to explain the game is just to go through the different character actions that you have. Every round of play has 2 different parts of it. Choosing your characters, which, like I said before, is physically taking one of the cards from your hand from your own set of cards, and then once everyone has locked in their choice, rattling off each of the different characters, and then seeing who has what character, and then performing the actions in that order. Now, I'll note a couple of things up front. First and foremost, if you are the only person to select a character and utilize their ability, and you actually have to utilize their ability in order for this to happen, then you will get a gift. That's usually like an extra whatever it is that you would normally be getting. So, for instance, if you would normally be getting a ship from the shipwright, you'll get an extra free ship. Also, if you happen to be the first player and you would be eligible to get a gift, and you take the action, you will also get double the benefits of that gift. So if I was taking the shipwright, I'd get 2 free ships. And so it goes. Now, the downside, though, if you're choosing a character, is if for whatever reason, let's say you choose the wrong character accidentally, or you have a plan and the plan just goes horribly awry, you choose the character and you cannot or will not take the action, well, then you're going to be penalized by having to take a black spot, which is -3 points at the end of the game, and that is a big deal. Alright, so the first character card is the shipwright. Let me get this in good focus here. So what the shipwright does, as you might imagine, is let you build ships. So very simply, you actually have to spend points in order to make this happen, because remember, points in this game are treasure chests, which is money. So that's your money in the game. So every player actually, and I forgot to mention this, but every player actually starts off with points. I believe it is 10 points. No, excuse me, it's 7 points. But you'll start off with that amount of points just so that you can actually utilize the shipwright. But in any event, remember that if you were the only player to do the shipwright, or if you were the only player to do the shipwright and you're the first player, you're going to get a gift or possibly a double gift. So every chest that you choose to spend, you're going to be able to build one of your ships. You'll take it out of your reserve and put it into your fleet, which we just say is on the game board in your own little corner of the game board. And you can build up to however many ships you have or treasure chests that you have, whichever you're actually going to run out of first. Now here I'll also note down in the bottom corner there are certain icons. Now the icon that looks like a spirally stone means that this card allows you to perform rituals. Simply by playing this card, you are allowed to perform any of the rituals that are out on the game board, which we'll explain at the end. The crossed out symbol here is hand resetting. Some cards, not the shipwright, let you reset your hand once you've resolved the action at the end of the round. So, in other words, you don't claim all of your cards that you've played back normally at the end of the round. You have to have played one of the characters that lets you do so. The shipwright does not. Next up, we have the Governor. Now, the Governor's ability is the weirdest of all of the characters, and he may actually become useless at a certain point in the game. So when you choose to use the Governor, he lets you take one of the Corsair flags. And you can have more than one Corsair flag during the course of the game, and as far as I can tell, you can't lose it. And you can even have, but once they're gone, they're gone. And when you take one of the Corsair flags, you have to do two things. First off, you have to take a black spot. But the second thing is you get all of your ships that are currently in your reserve, not in your fleet, and build them immediately and put them in your fleet without losing any points, which could be very, very big in the earlier stages of the game. But again, you have to have flags available for that to happen. Now, the gift of the governor is that he lets you get rid of one of your black spots. So if you're the only person to choose that, you can actually get rid of the black spot you just took just for using the governor. And if you're the first player, you get to get rid of 2 of them. Now, the captain is the next one, and he is one of the most complicated of the characters because what his action is a main focus of the game. First off, I'll just get it out of the way right now. His gift is yin-yang tokens, either 2 or 4, depending on what you are. And he is one of the characters that lets you reset your hand, but you're not allowed to do rituals with him. So here's what happens with the captain. The captain is essentially plundering. I've been referring to it as naval combat, but it's actually called plundering in this game. When you choose to plunder, 2 different things are going to happen. First off, you must choose one of the plundering cards from your hand. So plundering cards all look like this. They'll have that same symbol up in the top corner, the crossed swords. You'll have artwork. You'll have a number of these red flagged ships, and then you'll have one of the Corsair flags. So first off, you're going to put that card and you're going to put it here on this spot in the Adventurers board. And whichever player has the flag that is up in the top corner, if it's been claimed already, is immediately going to take a black spot because every player is potentially going to take part in the plundering. And if you plunder your own country, you're taking a black spot. That's all there is to it. Now, what these red ships mean are that those are the caravan ships that all the players are going to have to fight against. So if I played that particular card, which has 3 of those caravan ships, I'm going to put it into that spot, which also functions as a discard pile. And these dice are just going to get placed in the center. Then, starting with the player who played the card, and then going around in clockwise order, from your built ships, your fleet of ships, let's say I had this many built, I choose how many ships I want to take part in the plundering. I can only choose a number of ships equal to whatever amount of ships are on the card, or I shouldn't say that with authority. It's +2 if you're playing with 3 players. If you're playing with 4 players, it's +1 to however many caravan ships there are. If you're playing with 2 players, it's +3 to however many caravan ships there are. So in this case, because let's say hypothetically we're playing a 2-player game, we'll say, I get to put in a total of 6 ships if I really want to. 6 ships can take part in the plundering. And then my opponent has the chance, and maybe they'll just throw in 4. Maybe they don't have as many as me that they can submit. And by the way, yes, other cards have different varying amounts of ships along with the different flags. So once everyone has locked in their decision of how many ships are going to commit to the plundering, whoever is the active player, whoever played that card, is going to take all the dice, all of them, including the caravans and all the players' dice, and roll all of them so that they all land on the mat. If any roll off the mat, you have to re-roll all of them. And then you're going to keep them in place and compare the caravan numbers to every dice that's next to it, starting with the closest. What's happening here is that the pirates are kind of working together to kill these caravan ships, but the caravans are all fighting back at every ship at the same time. So let's say so right here, obviously, we'll focus in a bit. The 1 red caravan die there is closest to my blue 5. Now, my blue 5 is higher than that 1, so that immediately gets destroyed because that was the closest. We have to resolve that one first. Here, actually, this is very, very good for the the pirates. So let's make it a little bit tough just to have a better example here. So let's say that this was the scenario. So that red 4 is closest to the green 3, so that green 3 is going to get killed first. So that die goes back off to the side. And then the red gets compared to the blue. Those are the same number, which means they killed each other. And then over here, the same thing will happen. The 6 is close. The 2 6s are closest to each other, so those 2 will kill each other. And then that's it. That is the end of combat. Now, a few different things happen. First off, for every ship that you lose in combat, you get to take a yin-yang token. Every ship that is still alive in the sea you get to take a good card from the top of the deck. They go face up in front of you. Now, every ship can normally only hold, unless you do a ritual, can normally only hold one good. So you will have to physically lock down one of your ships just to hold whatever goods that you're taking, and then they can no longer participate in combat. All right, next for the character actions is the Aborigines. The Aborigines are going to enable you to, if I can ever focus, to swap out one of the port cards. And notice that she does not let you do rituals, but she will help you reset your hand. And her actual gift is she lets you take a good card off the top of the deck, or 2 good cards if you're the first player. Again, if you're the only player that chose her. Now, the port cards look like this. And you actually have one that's already printed onto the adventurer board there. And this lets you manipulate the price of items. Now, you can always sell one of the 3 items for 1, but if you sell 3 or more at a time, this isn't with you can't sell with the Aborigine. She is only changing out the port. You can always sell a good for 1, but if you're using the merchant card to sell, you can sell, and you sell at least 3 of something without using a ritual, you can sell it for potentially 2 or 3, depending on what port card is out there. So no matter what, if this was the port card that was in play, I could only sell my bananas for 1. But if I sold 3 or more coffee, I'd get 3 points for each of them, 3 chests. Whereas rum would only be 2. It splits the difference. And you see that every port card is a little bit different. Sounds like I'm saying report card, but I'm saying port. Next up is the Shaman card, who's a little bit funky. What he does is there are certain curse cards in the deck, and he'll enable you to use one of them from your hand of adventuring cards, and he also does a reset on your hand as well. His gift is actually just to protect your ships, so whatever the curse is, it affects everybody, but some of the curses that specifically target and destroy your ships, they'll be protected if you're the one that played the Shaman, and if you played him alone. So some of the curses look like this, and they all do something a little bit different, and they all have to be looked up on the back of the book. Some of them are things like for every 10 chests that you have, the player, you'll lose 2 chests if you're affected by this curse. There's different cards for each of the goods, where all the dice that are in players' fleets are all going to be rolled, and whichever one of them comes up as a certain number, in this case 3 for the sirens, you have to discard a rum or destroy one of your ships. So there's a bunch of those out in the game. This one, along those same lines, has you rolling dice from each of the players, and if those dice are destroyed by one of the caravan dice, you have to get rid of one of your talisman cards, which are points, or start destroying your ships as well. So these can be really nasty. Next, we have the Merchant, who I already mostly explained. When you play the Merchant card, that allows you to sell. He also lets you do rituals, but not reset your hand. And your gift is actually treasure chests for using the Merchant. But you can sell as many goods as you want, or as few when you use him. And finally, of the action cards, you have the Cartographer. If you play him alone, you draw 1 card. If you play him, if you just play him, you get 1 card. If you play him alone, you get 2. Or for the first player, you get a total of 3 cards from the Adventurer deck. And then the last thing I'll explain are the rituals, which some of the characters are going to let you do. In order to fuel the rituals, you have to discard the yin-yang tokens, but whenever you are eligible to play rituals, you can play as many of them as you want in whatever order that you want. So actually, we'll explain this one first. This is the one that you can just do as many times as you want, and you don't need to keep track of it. For 3 yin-yang tokens, you can make it so that a good that you're selling is being treated as a set, even though you didn't sell that many. So let's say, for example, you're at port, you have 2 coffee. Coffee are currently worth 3 treasure chests, and you really want to take advantage of that, but you only have 2 coffee. You don't have 3 to sell, which would enable you to sell them for more than 1. It's a trippy concept, I know. I'll talk more about that in my final thoughts. But basically, this ritual lets you treat that as if you sold 3 or more of them, and then you can go ahead and sell them. This one is for invincible ships. You spend 3 of your yin-yang tokens, you take the token, and that means that during every fight you're going to be able to protect one of your ships, and you can buy that multiple times and protect more of your ships from being destroyed by the caravans. They will not protect you from the curses, however. And then you have storage. For every 2 tokens you spend, you get extra storage. For every storage token that you have, one of your ships can carry an extra piece of cargo, which is good. It makes it so that you can actually keep more of your ships in your fleet and ready for plundering. Oh, and one last thing, because I just remembered this, if I didn't make it clear, in case there is any kind of doubt or dispute over which die is closest to the caravan during the plundering, there is a ruler on the bottom of the character card board that reminds you of what order to resolve all the characters in. But that's essentially the game. Once you have finished out that round, every player has taken their action with their character cards. The first player marker passes. You do it all over again. If you're eligible to take your cards back, you do. Otherwise, you just keep playing cards until you finally play a card that lets you take all of your cards back. The game ends when you draw the last round's card out of the deck, and then you'll have 3 more rounds at that point. And then whoever has the most treasure chests / points at the end is going to be the winner. You'll have one last chance to sell any goods that you have left over at whatever the current market price is. You take -3 for each of your black spots. You get a point for every one of your talisman cards, and a point for any 3 talisman markers that you have. Or excuse me, yin-yang tokens is what they're called. And that's that. Now, let's get to my final thoughts. Okay. There are parts of Pirates of the Seven Seas that I really like, that I think are very interesting, very unique, and not like, or perhaps they are similar to other elements I've seen in other games, but the way that they all come together is in a very interesting and unique way. But there are parts of this game I really don't like. I won't go so far as saying I hate them, but they definitely hold the game back. And it feels like, well, let's just jump right into it. Theme and components I always start off with. I think that those are probably the best parts of the game. I think that I'm not into pirates. I'm on record as saying I don't get pirates. I don't know why they're that appealing. And they are definitely coming back in a big way, although I think Vikings have totally overtaken them as far as overused cliche. And both of them leaving zombies in the dust at this point. Excuse me. But despite the fact that I don't like pirates, I can appreciate if the theme is used well. And I think it's used well here. You're going to ports of call, you're selling goods, you're fighting other ships, and you're making use of all these different characters on the ship. The black spot, of course, because every pirate game, or almost every pirate game, has to have that. All of these things are used very, very well. So if you do like pirates, you're going to be all over this one. Okay, that's definitely going to get your foot in the door at least. And then as far as the presentation of the game, the artwork is fantastic. It's really, really good artwork. The thing with the tin and how it's used, I feel is unnecessary, and I feel was just a way for them to say, hey, this is another way this game is different than any other game. And that's fine, and I like the fact that it's a tin that, because of the size of it, could actually sit on a shelf if someone wanted to keep it. I don't. But so I do like that, but again, this goes to the core of what I actually don't like about the game, and that's that it's an unnecessary thing that they did. Not a huge deal, but while I think the physical components and everything are very nice, maybe not necessary to do the whole board thing. Okay. But all the other components are fine. I can't really complain about that. Other than the fact that it's hard to tell which of those little discs are supposed to be for what, not a huge deal. Now, moving on to the gameplay. It has the action selection element, which I do like. I've seen that in a lot of other games. The one I always refer back to is Citadels, but I've seen that in other games. In fact, I was just looking up on my shelf, and Ultimate Warriors has a mechanism like that. So you see this in a lot of different and varied games because it works. It's a good mechanism. Everyone is trying to figure out what the other player is going to play, and the fact that you get bonuses if you're the only person that does something says, well, maybe I'll hold off on doing this, even though I really want cards now, because I have a very good feeling that that person who hasn't played his cartographer yet is probably going to play it now. Those types of decision-making, it's very interesting. I like that the game lends itself to that. The whole aspect of the plundering and how that works is not as cumbersome as I feared that it would be. Rolling the dice, sometimes using the measuring stick if you have to, figuring out what's destroyed and what's not, and then getting goods because of it is at least an interesting idea, as are all of the adventure cards that can influence all these different actions that you can take. And, going to the port of call, modifying the price, selling the goods, all these different things. In theory, they work okay. Here's my big problem, and I already alluded to this. This could be a very simple game. And thematically, and in some ways, just mechanically, that's what the game lends itself to be. A simple, straightforward, family-weight game. And there's hints of that there. It feels like that's what the game was supposed to be. And it's not that complicated. But there's so much excess in this game that doesn't need to be there, that just complicates it and bogs it down. This game is probably 30 to 40 minutes longer than it has to be. I think that this game is, even if you really know what you're doing, I mean, I played this game 3 times, and by the 3rd time, we shaved a lot of time off of it. But even playing with the, with the same group for the 2nd and the 3rd game, I was kind of like, wow, this is just dragging on. Because there's so much clunky stuff in the game that really could just be cut out completely. For instance, with the action cards, there's not that many action cards in the game, the characters that you play. But one of them, the Corsair, is so weird and obtuse, and it just becomes useless. Which you might think adds less time to the game. But the whole mechanism of having the Corsair flags is another aspect of like, okay, who's got what flag, and let me play this, and then it's just completely unnecessary. They could have had this whole thing where you have alignment and done it very simply by saying, okay, everyone's got alignment at the start of the game. That's that. And instead you have a whole other card that doesn't really do much of anything except let you take one of those flags and then becomes useless, but you still have to yell it out in case. I mean, but no one would ever willingly choose that. So that could have just been cut out, replace it with a different character, have the same kind of theme of taking the Corsair, whatever it might be, a sort of push your luck mechanism of taking the black spots. And the black spots, cut it out. Get rid of it. I know that there should be some sort of penalty, and it is a pirate game. Pirates push their luck all the time, I guess, is the theme that you go for with pirates, and that's what the black spot represents. But that is such a nasty thing in this game, and that's one of the things that takes this game away from being a simple family weight game, because it's like so many things you can potentially do. Just playing a card wrong, or, when you take the Corsair tiles, which is supposed to be a very good and powerful thing, and it is risky because you take a black spot then and there, but you could get saddled with a lot of black spots because of that and make that completely useless to you. And you'll think back on the whole game and be like, why did I do that? So one of those things has to go, whether it's the black spots or the Corsair and the Governor card, or everything altogether that has to do with that could just be completely removed, and the game, I think, would not only not suffer for it, would probably be better for it. Other things, like going to port and selling. Now, I like the idea that the port can change depending on, I like the idea that you have the power to modify the port for what you are trying to accomplish. And there's an interesting element there of, hey, should I change the port? Because he has the same goods I have, maybe he'll do it. And then it's like a game of chicken, like who wastes, quote unquote, their action to do that first, and who's going to benefit from them having done that. But since you change ports before you sell, maybe another player totally is going to try to screw you guys up, which could happen and set you back. That's interesting. But the way that goods are sold is totally stupid. Like, you have to sell a set of 3 in order to get the better type of good. Why not just say, hey, some goods are worth more money now. Period. Doesn't matter how many you have. That's that. Everyone gains the bonus of it together. Again, not a huge deal in and of itself, but it's an example of how much fat and excess there is in the game that just could have been trimmed out. The curse cards, overly complicated. There's every single one of them does something different, and I'm happy that there's a variety of them, but why? I mean, why have all of them you constantly have to look it up? It's hard to memorize them. They all do something a little bit different. The iconography is confusing, and it weighs the game down. And why have an action that is only to screw yourself and the other players potentially? Cut it out. Replace it with something else that's positive, that can help everyone, that gives you another option to do during the game to get points. The whole aspect of losing ships. I mean, there's so many of these little things that I'm like, why? Why bother? It doesn't add anything to the game. Like losing ships as you get up in points. I know it's like a catch-up mechanism, but it's not even that big a deal to lose a ship. And that's another thing, too, is that as cool as it is to plunder, and that is probably the most exciting part of the game, is rolling all those dice and comparing things. First off, it's too short. I mean, it's like, boom, you do it, yay, now we're back to simple playing cards. It's one and done, and it may not happen again for a while because people aren't going to be ready to plunder or have the right cards to do so. But it's so completely random. It's totally random. You can get totally hosed by it. You can get all of your ships destroyed just because of the way that they land. Whereas the rest of the game is very deterministic. I play this card. I do this action. It's purely me trying to outthink you and make decisions. Now I'm totally screwed by these dice, which goes back to the curses, as a matter of fact. Some of those curse cards, you roll poorly, you are decimated. You lose like 6 goods that you stockpiled. That is life or death right there. That is you winning or losing the game. And I don't know that in a game that lasts as long as this one does, 90 minutes to 2 hours, that it's good that you can be completely decimated by one die roll. So as cool as how some of those elements could potentially be, it's very rough. And then again, you have to do the shipwright or the governor to get the ships, to make them ready to go for the fleet. They might get bogged down with goods. It's like there's a complicated game here and a very, very light game, and they're warring with each other to see who comes out on top. That's what I constantly felt throughout the game. And the pacing of the game is all off, too. The game doesn't end until you go through the Adventurer's deck and get down to that card, but then it still goes on for another 3 rounds. And I'm like, well, why not just say that everyone draws cards from the round? Make the cartographer just extra cards you could potentially get. That way, at least the game will have a set determined length. That would make sense, and again, keep with the game being a mid-weight to light game. But I don't think they knew what they were going for here, so I can't really recommend this. There's some really great and interesting elements to it. It's a beautiful game to look at. If you love pirates, I would say at least take a look at it and check it out, see if it's for you. But for me, just didn't work. It was just too rough around the edges. Other people I played it with sort of had the same mixed feelings, like, if they just did this, this, and this, and got rid of this, it just would have worked better. And I feel the same way. So that's Pirates of the Seven Seas. Not an awful game by any means, but definitely just a little too weird for my tastes. Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.